Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and I hope that you all must be doing great. So let's start with the analysis video for 8th of August 2023. So firstly, an update in the context of Supreme Court and the situation in Manipur. So it is going to appoint an all-women panel to oversee the relief measures in the state of Manipur. So we saw that how even on social media, the videos of women who were paraded naked that was circulated that went viral, and yes, we know about the people they were killed and they were even burnt alive. So in the context of specifically rights of women and their welfare and protection, so Supreme Court, it will be forming an all women panel. So its function is going to be supervision, intervention and monitoring the relief and the rehabilitation in the state of Manipur, and it has appointed a retired IPS officer to monitor the overall investigation of the cases registered during the violence. So we saw few days back that it reprimanded the state and the central government over the inadequate steps that have been taken, and still we are seeing the incidences of violence. Even they continue. People are still dying in the state, and also, it also looked into the investigation behind the registered FIRs. So even there, the situation is dismal. So by order of the Supreme Court, a bench headed by the CGI, it took the following decisions to help out the affected people in Manipur. So to appoint three former women High Court judges, they would be providing a healing touch. Then to order the DGPs of the six states, neighboring states of Manipur, and not just neighboring states, the northeastern states, and they would be basically naming six DIG rank officers to take charge of six SITs each. And they would be now also enforcing multiple layers of monitoring of the investigation behind, basically, so that it remains free and fair and it is unbiased. And apart from this, it would make five officers of the rank DSP or SP from other state parts of the CBI, and to make the officers carry on investigation under supervision of a CBI joint director. So these are in detail the steps that have been suggested, and it would be taken forward by the Supreme Court. So here we have all the political news, so we can skip all of these. On the editorial page, so here China's worldview and its postulates and what is we like having a reality check. So Chinese leaders, especially the current paramount leader of China, Xi Jinping, constantly refer to changes unseen in a century, implying that the decline of West-promoted rules-based order is inevitable and that a new Chinese-promoted world order is set to prevail. So this is basically one of the things that are always, promoted by China, and implicit also is that a Chinese driven world is better suited to a world defined by disorder, asymmetry, and fragmentation. So that's what China wants to push for. So changes unseen in a century, it is one of the underlying principles of Xi Jinping thought. And like you can talk in terms of militarily, technological, cultural, biological aspects, that given China's rise, accelerated by technology and shaped by its economic strength, demographic potential, its success is inevitable. So right now, even if we talk about the current economic situation, so even that is not so promising, because when we talk about the recovery of China out of the COVID-19 impacts, so there basically we're seeing that it is faltering. So US is the main threat. We know about the trade war that is going on between US and China. So the current crop of Chinese leaders believes that the ongoing threats to China, however, it remains, and the main threat for China, it comes from United States. So that's one thing. So here we have one of the keywords, polycentric competition and cooperation. So Chinese scholars believe that we have entered such a world where we see polycentric competition and cooperation instead of talking about unipolar world or the bipolar world. So China, there might be a need that it might need to come up with an alternative theory of modernity if it hopes to be the West's free market concepts and beliefs, but odds are stacked against it. So in a way, we can say it is capitalism versus communism. Then prescriptions and reversals, you can just go through it. Basically here, you can see we're talking in the context of economy only. So if we look at some of the figures, okay, here, like we see that leaving aside for the moment China's worldview, like how China sees the entire world or how it basically wants to see it in future. Leaving that aside, if we go by the theoretical postulates as formulated by Deng Xiaoping, such as the four modernizations, which paved the way for China's emergence as an economic superstar, reality that China it confronts today, it appears somewhat different. So issue before China it is not one of the decline of the US as much as how China it can possibly reproduce the mind-boggling growth of the first 2 decades of the current century. When we saw an 800% increase in the overall trade volumes, unimaginable increase in GDP, lifting of nearly 800 million Chinese people out of poverty. So this is, we're talking the beginning of the century. But going forward, we are seeing that the momentum, it couldn't be continued and maintained. And in today's times, we see China in a little challenging situation. So we are seeing serious reverses, be it its economic performance or the global challenges that are to be dealt by China. Apart from this, obviously there were disruptions because of COVID-19 pandemic. And in the context of US, obviously they're not in good terms. We talk about trade war. So real question is whether China can indeed produce a model that can supplant the West so-called rule-based international order. Like, can China come up with something that can be an alternative to this and create one better suited to a fragmented world order? And obviously, we know about the growing tensions in Taiwan Strait. So even there, we are seeing US trying to, increase its presence or its role, obviously, in supporting Taiwan. And again, China does not like this. So issue of Taiwan, it also hovers over the sea, notwithstanding the current tensions and despite the sub-rattling by both the sides, it would seem that a major conflict on the lines of the Ukraine conflict in Taiwan Strait, it is not yet on the anvil. But again, when we talk about Taiwan Strait in the region, the regional security, so that definitely becomes a challenge for the world order and stability. So we have already done and gone through the critical analysis for the provisions of the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill of 2023, which has been recently tabled in the Parliament. So you can just go through it if you missed the analysis video. So India's mining policy shift, again, it's a very, very important topic. So India's import dependent for critical and the deep-seated minerals. Are we like really import dependent upon these? The next question is, why is it essential to get the private sector to explore these minerals? Like, why are we thinking कि private sector का role increase किया जाना चाहिए and how obviously that can help us? Then has India's existing mining policy attracted private sector investment? The policy, the policy that we are following right now, is it in a way talking about promoting the private sector's role in the mining or not? And how does the Mines and Minerals Bill 2023 plans to do that? Agar it is like not there, then how does this new bill plans to do that? So these are some of the questions that we'll be able to get answers to by going through this article. So obviously recently we Parliament में Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Bill 2023 table किया गया है, and that is going to attract the private sector investment in exploration of the critical and deep-seated minerals in the country. So 6 minerals पे focus है, like lithium, which is obviously आज के टाइम में बहुत important raw material है, because it is used as a raw material in manufacturing the batteries of electric vehicles and even in energy storage solutions. So it is critical and a strategic mineral. So इसमें exploration and mining करना of these 6 minerals previously classified as atomic minerals, they were restricted to government-owned entities. So critical minerals कितना ज़्यादा important है for India? So variety of minerals exist besides those which are used in creating fuel. मतलब here we're talking about just the critical minerals. So it's very clear from their name itself that they are very critical. Now, critical, it can be in terms of energy security, national security, stability of our economy. So likewise, because obviously critical minerals, if we have sufficient amount of domestic supply, so that would somewhere reduce our import dependence. And again, if imports पे dependence कम होगी, तो that would be again promoting more of stability in the country. So here you can see clean energy transition में critical minerals बहुत important role play करते हैं. We're not just talking about energy transitions, we're talking about clean energy. And obviously that is one of the major focus areas these days. We talk about the green energy transition. So lithium, it is also called as white coal. Lithium ka, I have told you, one of the important usage in battery of electric vehicles. Then lack of availability of critical minerals. Yeah, if their concentration is very less, yeah, they are not economically viable to extract. So it leads to import dependency, supply chain vulnerabilities hoti hai, even disruption of their supplies. So that is basically, that's why they are called critical minerals. So this is one idea. Like here, example has also been given that China, it has majority ownership of the cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 70% of the world ka cobalt hai, that is mined. So China also has by far the largest amount of reserves of the REEs of any country in the world, which is followed by Vietnam, Brazil, and Russia. So major economies, when you talk about US, UK, European Union, in recent past, they've also moved to secure their supply chain resilience for such minerals to reduce the reliance for their availability on countries like China. So in a way, since China here also it enjoys the monopoly in terms of the supply. So because of that, the domestic supply of these critical minerals becomes extremely important. And when we talk about the deep-seated minerals, so it includes gold, silver, copper, zinc, lead, nickel, cobalt, all these, diamonds. So these are difficult and expensive to explore and mine. So since the name says deep-seated, they are to be mined from quite a depth. So that's why we need to look at that. Do we have the technology in order to safely extract them or mine them? So why is the private sector important for these critical minerals exploration? So there have been studies by different organizations like Atomic Minerals Directorate for Exploration and Research, and then Center for the Social and Economic Progress. So it notes कि इंडिया की जो unique geological and tectonic settings हैं, The two keywords are geological and tectonic setting of India. It is conducive to hosting the potential mineral resources, and that its geological history. That's also similar to the mining rich regions of Western Australia or Eastern Africa. So in terms of richness of the minerals, so that is basically not a problematic thing for India. So when we talk about the primary step to discovering the mineral resources and eventually finding economically viable reserves in the mineral exploration, which comes in various stages before mining. So stages of exploration, it can be divided as per the United Nations framework for classification of resources into G4, G3, G2, and G1. So basically these are different stages. So reconnaissance, prospecting, general exploration, and detailed exploration. So it is estimated that India has explored just 10% of its obvious geological potential and less than 2% of which is mined, and the country spends less than 1% of the global mineral exploration budget. So you can imagine the potential that exists. So India's mining policy, it had kept the greenfield exploration of minerals out of the purview of the private sector explorers for some years, which meant that they could only get licenses to further prospect and mine the resources that had been explored by the government entity. So that is, in a way, we can say they're allowed in the brownfield exploration of the minerals and not in the greenfield exploration. So greenfield and brownfield, the difference is that in greenfield, basically nothing has been done. You need to do everything from the very beginning, from scratch. And in brownfield, already like when we're talking about brownfield FDI. So in that case, like we have the infrastructure and things, we just need somewhat more additional amount of investment. So nothing is done from the very beginning or nothing is started anew. So that's the basic difference. So this is one thing, that the mining policy did not allow the private sector participation in greenfield exploration. So in a way, we can say the control rested more with the government. So obviously, we require different techniques like aerial surveys, geological mapping, geochemical analysis, and it is a highly specialized, time-intensive, monetarily risky operation with less than 1% of the explored projects becoming commercially viable mines. So the success rate is less and cost is more. So India's PSUs, they are in a relatively better position to explore the superficial and the bulk minerals like coal and iron ore. They had not fared well when it came to deep-seated minerals and the critical minerals, owing to the high expenditure and long duration of these risky projects. So जब हम बात करें कि जो surface पे या थोड़ा सा we'll have to dig and mine, we get the minerals. So usme the performance of KC sector has been good. But when we're talking about exploration of the deep-seated minerals या critical minerals की बात करें, तो because of high cost and जो gestation period है, even that is very long. So because of that, the government sector, it hasn't been able to perform very nicely. So herein basically the private sector can come in, and obviously with their experience and expertise, they can do it in a much more efficient manner. Now coming to whether the mining policy of India, it is conducive or is it favoring the private sector participation or not? So when we talk about the Mines and Minerals Act of 1957, it is the primary legislation that governs mining activity in India. It has been amended several times, and so India recognized the need for the private and the foreign investment in the mining sector, including the mineral exploration back in 1993. So need for private and foreign investments, that was identified back then. And accordingly, then this act, it was amended so as to allow the interested parties to apply for the mineral concessions through a first come first served basis. And later on, they could also get the prospecting license or mining leases and could even apply for early stage or greenfield exploration through Reconnaissance permits. So coming to early 2010s, as the mining industry it seemed to be gathering momentum, it was growing. So then there was concerns about favoritism, nepotism, you can say. And 2015 May, this act it was amended to allow the private companies to also participate in the government auctions for the mining leases and composite licenses. However, due to evidence of the mineral content rule, only the government export projects they were auctioned, limiting the private sector involvement. So in a way, again, they were not allowed in the greenfield investments or exploration. Coming to this new bill that has been proposed recently. So the bill, it omits at least 6 previously mentioned atomic minerals from a list of 12 which cannot be commercially mined. So this list, it has been omitted. Earlier there were 12 minerals that could be commercially mined, and now it has been reduced to 6. So being on the atomic minerals list, exploration and mining of the 6 minerals, it was previously reserved only for the government entities. And second provision or the second amendment that it is talking about is that the act, it prohibits pitting, trenching, drilling, and subsurface excavation as part of the reconnaissance, which included mapping and survey. So it allows these prohibited activities now. Then another thing is that it also proposes a new type of license to encourage reconnaissance, that is a level and prospective stage exploration by the private sector. And then it is also specifying the maximum area for the exploration activities in up to 1,000 square kilometers will be allowed under a single exploration license. So these are some of the new, we can say, proposed provisions, and they've been compared with the things that or the norms that existed before. Then the issues related to this proposed bill has been also talked about, so you can just go through that. So government tells the Supreme Court when we talk about Project Cheetah and the concerns related to its success. So international cheetah experts, they will be consulted. So why wasn't this done before is a question. And the court, it also disposes of the applications by conservationists, saying that project it is better left to the wisdom of the experts in the field rather than judiciary. So it had earlier urged the government to move the big cats to more conducive environment. And then when we talk about even the international cheetah experts, they were also sharing their concerns about the information not being shared with them transparently, specifically the environmental experts from South Africa and Namibia. So exercise Malabar is going to be held from 11th of August. So we'll be having the 31st edition of it, and obviously the participating countries includes India, Australia, Japan, and US. Basically all the Quad members, they would be participating in exercise Malabar. Again, we are seeing that India-made syrup, it has been found contaminated in Iraq, and alert has been issued by WHO. So obviously it somewhere impacts when we talk about that India wants itself to be the world manufacturer in terms of pharmaceuticals or generic drugs. But again, such incidences which threatens the life of patients, this will be a highly negative thing that can impact the reputation at the global stage. So we are seeing thousands of US sailors and Marines, they have reached Red Sea after Iran tensions. So from the perspective of map work and the geography of this region, it is very important. So you can just find out about that. So we see that according to data, individuals filing income above rupees 1 crore has doubled. So in a way, we are seeing that yes, GDP is growing, but at the same time, we can also say that income inequality has also increased. Coming to Mint newspapers, so they are quitting a festive season retail headache. So Indian retail sector, it hires the truckloads of temporary workers during the peak festival season starting in September. And we're seeing that the workers, they are basically quitting. So that's going to be a challenge. Suffering manpower crisis. So the retail sector, which is hiring, is banking, financial services, and insurance. So demand for the insurance, credit cards, mutual funds, that is robust, and selling these services requires large workforce. So experts say that demand for the sales and marketing roles, it has surged by about 30%. So that's why these workers are quitting and moving to these industries. Quote of the day is make millets a people's movement, because when one speaks of health security in millets, one should not believe that it is only the security of individual health, but it is equally dedicated to the health of the soil and ecology as well. So since we know that the millets, they are highly nutritious, so it can help us in tackling the nutritional security issue. Apart from that, there are also a climate resilient crops. So given we are going through the impacts of climate change, and we are seeing specifically they can be the best alternatives to the water intensive crops like sugarcane and wheat and rice. So not wheat but rice. So even there it can help, and thirdly it can also help in doubling the farmers income also. So let's have a look at Financial Express. So National Handloom Day was yesterday. So on National Handloom Day, let us reaffirm our commitment to popularize the local products. As far as weavers, they are concerned, our government has made numerous efforts to improve the supply chain. So how we have been promoting buy local and one district, one product, so as to popularize even these local products at global scale, global level, so that even these local producers, they can be held by increasing the global demand, because they are unique products, and that would be increasing exports also. It would also help in increasing the income of these local producers. So as we say that these local industries, they forms the backbone of the rural economy. So that's how they can be more promoted. And then obviously you need to know about the specific initiatives taken by the government in order to promote their interests. So when we're talking about the celebrations of this year to be the International Year of Millets, even by United Nations, so we can basically also make this millet option available to the BDS beneficiaries. And this can directly help in tackling the nutritional security. So production boost. So panel has also suggested setting up one shop initially selling exclusively millets. And in current year, around 1 million ton of nutri cereals, they would be procured from the farmers. Karnataka also aims at increasing the millet procurement and the consumption the next 3 years, up to 50% of the NFSA allocation of the grains. And monthly distribution of 5 kg of the food grains is stipulated under the National Food Security Act. So that includes rice, wheat, and coarse cereals per head to 800 million beneficiaries. So we are seeing that the auto parts which are manufactured from China, which are imported from China, the imports have increased, specifically when we are pushing the Make in India initiative. So obviously, Make in India, or even in other sectors recently, we saw the government taking the decision of curbing the imports of IT products and tablets and laptops. So even that is also, in a way, we can say that's protectionism, and that is to promote the domestic production and manufacturing activities and reduce the import dependence and obviously the highly dependency on China for specific items like the active pharmaceutical ingredients. So we are in a way trying to diversify that and at the same time increase the domestic self-reliance. So cross-border electricity trade, this was already discussed before. So India has ambitions to trade in power from South Asia and BIMSTEC to Southeast Asia. So this is one new avenue that can be explored. And obviously BIMSTEC too plays in roles, even global south, even that can be incorporated. Coming to the Times of India newspaper, so let's have a look at the new topics from here. So Jammu and Kashmir, how we can see progress and positive changes after the abolition of Article 370 there in 2019. So you can just go through these points of the improvements that have been witnessed post 2019 in Jammu and Kashmir. Moving forward, we see some other important topics for the day. So centers hold on Delhi administration titans. There's going to be drastic change in terms of the legislation. It removes the services from competence of the Delhi State Assembly. So basically the ordinance that was issued by the center, it has been passed by the parliament. So in the Jaisalmer fossils, scientists they have found a new dinosaur species and they name it after the Thar Desert. So are also the oldest fossils of the Dacrosaurid dinosaur ever discovered. So that's the name. So you can just go through it once. So ahead of the festive season, Prime Minister pitches for Swadeshi goods. So he urges the industry to build strong supply chain to meet the demand. So obviously you're talking about the domestic supply chain. And yeah, so in a way, it all depends upon your choice. But yeah, going for the Swadeshi goods to be your first choice can immensely help the economy as a booster during the festival season. So we see that khadi production, it has trebled over the last 9 years, while sales they have jumped fivefold. And added that when he was in Paris last month, he was told that there has been a massive increase in interest in khadi and the handloom. So demand it is increasing, but production has been declining. So it's important to increase the production. And if we are seeing revival in the demand, so obviously that's quite a positive thing. Coming to Indian Express newspaper, so let's see the newer topics from here. So this we've seen Supreme Court intervenes in Manipur. Apart from this, we've talked about the center gets control of Delhi while LG as Parliament stamps its approval to the bill. So Rajya Sabha MP Gogoi, he questions the basic structure and Justice Gogoi had quoted it. So he's the former CJ Ranjan Gogoi in Rajya Sabha, he's an MP now. So he questions the basic structure. So let's see what he's been saying. Attacking the invocation of basic structure doctrine by opposition on the government of NCT Bill 2023, former CJI and nominated Rajya Sabha member Ranjan Gogoi said that the doctrine is on very debatable jurisprudential basis. So does it violate the basic features of the constitution? There is a book by Tathaman, that is the former Solicitor General of India on the case of Nanda Bharati case 1973. So having read the book, my view is that the doctrine of the basic structure, the constitution, has a debatable, very debatable jurisprudential basis. So basic structure doctrine mandates the court to review and restrict the parliament's powers to amend the constitution's foundational principles. So calling this Delhi bill to be comprising of the foundational principles, basically that is what is being questioned. And he says that the basic structure doctrine within, like it itself is a debatable jurisprudential basis. So 3 lakh hectares of forest land has been diverted in the last 15 years. So herein comes the success rate of the policies, the schemes that have been initiated by the government. And apart from this, when we talk about even the CAMPA, which is the compensatory afforestation scheme, so the success rate, like if So much of land has been diverted in the last 15 years. What about the success or the effectiveness of the schemes that they are functioning? In order to ensure the land that is diverted, we are going ahead with planting of trees or spending money for that, for the environmental sustainability. So nearly 34% of the diverted forest land, it was used for mining and road construction purposes. And Punjab, it leads in diverting the forest land. So Punjab followed by Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, Telangana. And mining is at number 1. Then for road construction, irrigation, wind power. Okay, not in this manner. Mining, roads. Then we have irrigation. After that, transmission lines for defense. So that has been the main areas where the forest land has been diverted. So India's forest cover stands at 21.7%, or it is 7,13,789 square kilometers of the country's total area. And 514 hectares of land has been encroached so far. So obviously that's illegal. So a few bills have been passed by Lok Sabha, you can see them, and the ones which are important, we have already gone through the critical analysis. Again, India made syrups, they are under scrutiny by WHO. So this we've seen the repercussions on India's generic drugs industry when we see, or when we have a vision of seeing India as the global manufacturing hub for the generic drugs. So talking about the industrial policy, so the muscular industrial policy in advanced economies is the latest policy error since 2008 global financial crisis. So firstly, you need to be clear with the industrial policy, the provisions, the industrial policy of India, the changed provisions of the industrial policy, their effectiveness, and then as this article talks about at the global level. So let's start with this. So we're approaching the 15th anniversary of the global financial crisis of 2008. So not because it reminds us of the fateful months of 2008, that's why we're calling it to be a grim milestone, but because the chain of events the crisis engendered is likely to have profound consequences for our future. So that's why it has been termed as a grim milestone. So what's increasingly appreciated is that the rising tide of globalization in the 1990s and 2000s, it lifted many boats, but it also led to growing disenchantment in the West. So the China shock, it had followed out the blue collar jobs and spawned the increasing inequality. So what is less appreciated or recognized is how the policy response to this crisis, it accentuated these cleavages. Basically, it further increased when we talk about inequality instead of addressing that after this crisis. So after the initial response to this crisis, the fiscal policy tightened dramatically and injudiciously across the Western world, and structural fiscal deficits in the advanced economies that also tightened a whooping 5 to 10 percentage points of the GDP from peak to the trough between 2007 and 2017 as per IMF. So some of the reasons behind it were ideological in nature. Then some of this was complex and inflexible European fiscal rules that unduly emphasized austerity. So different governments were worried about the public debt. The fiscal policy was fighting the last war, even as the hysteresis from the GFC crisis was getting deeper and broader. So given this fiscal tightening that was witnessed, it was unsurprising that the advanced economies limped back from the crisis. So this was half the problem. So it induced the tight fiscal policy, induced excessively loose monetary policy that was struggling to combat the post-crisis economic malaise. So basically, we saw in terms of the policy reactions or decisions post the 2008 global financial crisis, firstly, tight fiscal policy, and because of that, we saw loose monetary policy. So when we're talking about tight fiscal policy, so in a way that is, we say less amount of government expenditure. When you talk about specifically the importance of the capital expenditure in terms of spurring growth, so that was reduced, and or we can say increasing the tax rates. So that is tight fiscal policy, and loose monetary policy promotes increase in money supply in the economy. So that's going into detail would be something more economical. So that is not required here. So too tight fiscal and too loose monetary over the last decade was exactly the wrong policy prescription for advanced economies in the world for several reasons. Means कि ये दो जो policy simultaneously work कर रही थी, that was we can say it was some way a wrong decision. So why it was wrong? Now let's understand that. So firstly, when you talk about the monetary and the fiscal policy working at the cross purposes, they nullified each other because one was tight fiscal policy, another was loose or expansionary monetary policy. So, जो outcome थे of the decisions or implementing the decisions, the ground level, वो एक दूसरे को counter कर रहे थे because here we are talking about the counter policies because one is tight monetary policy and another, sorry, tight fiscal policy and another is loose monetary policy. So labor markets in the advanced economies, they were too slow to recover. Then secondly, the excessive monetary easing, it distorted and inflated the asset prices that further accentuated inequality. It kept the zombie firms alive, preventing necessary creative destruction and induced a substitution away from the labor towards cheap capital, accentuating the employment malaise as well. सो कहीं ना कहीं वो जो ऑब्वियसली जब हम इकोनॉमिक्स की बात करते हैं तो थिंग्स आर कनेक्टेड इन अ चेन इन अ मैनर क्योंकि हर एक डिसीजन आगे फर्दर किसी ना किसी सेक्टर पे जरूर इम्पैक्ट क्रिएट करता है तो सिंस वी सी हेयर कि फर्स्ट जो बिकॉज ऑफ दिस क्लैश इन दीज टू पॉलिसीज जो labor markets they were very slow to recover. सेकेंड नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट था जो एक्सेसिव मॉनेटरी ईजिंग देखी गई उसकी वजह से ऑब्वियसली लिक्विडिटी इंक्रीज हो गई इकोनॉमी में तो इन्फ्लेशन इंक्रीज हो गई सो उसकी वजह से एसेट प्राइसेस इंक्रीज हुए कहीं ना कहीं इसकी वजह से इनइक्वालिटी इंक्रीज हुई और जो ज़ॉम्बी फर्म्स थी दे स्टिल केप्ट फंक्शनिंग एंड अगेन उसकी वजह से देयर वी विटनेस सब्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ लेबर अवे away from labor to the cheap capital and obviously उसकी वजह से unemployment problem increase हो गई. Thirdly, जो quantitative easing थी that became the cure for every ailment, obviating the need for more fundamental reform in advanced economies like retooling and reskilling workers confronting the China shock, building infrastructure and cutting regulation, building deeper and smarter safety nets to compensate those who had been displaced from globalization. And fourth, that all this sow the seeds for deglobalization, जो आज हम बात करते हैं, that we are seeing move towards policy decisions, indicating the countries moving towards protectionism. So that's there. So frustrated by all these, the economies obviously with this malaise unemployment की बात करो या deepening inequality या inflation की बात करो so advanced economies they did the easy thing that is assign the blame outside and again चाहे आप बात करो जो भी decisions लिए जा रहे हैं moving towards protectionism so वो भी कहीं ना कहीं इस चीज की वजह से है that is connected to the 2008 global financial crisis and the policy decisions that were taken after that and उससे जो impacts create हुए. So the hardening trade stance की अगर हम बात करें, India it started hiking the tariffs well before the post-pandemic mood of protectionism in the West it kicked in. So again जिस चीज के बारे में भी हम बात कर रहे थे, again कि one of the result that is move towards protectionism, उसके पीछे की स्टोरी अभी हम समझ रहे थे. Now we are just talking about protectionism and all of that. इंडिया में जो decisions लिए जा रहे हैं, we are seeing कि hike in tariffs किया जा रहा है so that imports का जो basically in a way obviously that restricts the imports, domestic economy के लिए उसको support करने के लिए decisions लिए जा रहे हैं. So India started hiking the tariffs well before the post-pandemic mode of protectionism. मतलब before this emergence of the global scale, मतलब firstly we saw things happening with the Western countries, how they were taking decisions which were showing a move towards protectionism. So उससे पहले से we are seeing that India has been increasing the tariff rates, and even we negotiate with several bilateral trade deals also. India has chosen to stay out of the key regional trading arrangements. So obviously one of them is RCEP. So custom duty hikes, यहाँ पे you can see the policy decisions they've been mentioned. So we see government's justification for that. Multiple justifications for the move have been offered by the government, including it is important from the perspective of national security, and more plausible reason it could be that center's revised जो PLI scheme for the IT hardware that has failed to find much traction. So even so, the use of licensing as a weapon stands out, given that the tariff barrier option have been increasingly weaponized by the government, that was not used. So industry players said that they were not aware of any consultations before the decisions. Basically, industry players, they were not consulted by the government, and order issued was with immediate effect. Obviously, the firms, they would have to comply with the decision of the government. High trade barriers, so tariff hikes, they have come multiple times, covering well over 500 item categories since 2016, marking a calibrated departure from the policy of reducing the import duty. So since 2016, we are seeing government have been taking decisions to increase the import tariffs. And India's trade policy review of the World Trade Organization 2021 made a clear note of this trend as well. So the tariffs, they continue to range between 0 to 150%. So Ministry of Commerce का कहना ये है, basically it is not agreeing कि जो duty increase की जा रही है, जो import tariffs increase किए जा रहे हैं, they are not protectionist in nature. So government is denying this, कि these decisions of hike in tariffs is not protectionist in nature. So one of the officials said that India's stance on hiking the tariffs mirrored the broader trend globally. So जो global level पे हो रहा है, कहीं ना कहीं इंडिया भी वो ही कर रहा है. And New Delhi, it had shown a renewed interest in signing the bilateral FTAs also. So with both the statements have an element of truth. India's tariff hikes it started well before largely post-pandemic mode of protectionism in the West that kicked in. This we have understood. And obviously because of hike in the tariffs, finally there would be more disputes in future at WTO as well. So यहाँ पे steps लिखे गए हैं कि जो भी government के policy decisions रहे, despite the opposition, they were taken forward. So we are seeing a shift in the stance. So decisive shift in the policies on customs duties started from the mid of 2017. So we are seeing this. And the decision to bring the import tariffs in line with the ASEAN duties, addressing the issue of duty inversion. Like duty inversion, if I explain the meaning of it, basically जो raw materials हम import करते हैं उस पे duty higher amount की impose की जाती है compared to the finished goods that we're importing. So that's called duty inversion. So when we're talking about one side of the picture कि कौन से areas में duty increase की गई है, तो कुछ ऐसे items भी हैं जहाँ import duty को कम भी किया गया है. So this aspect it does not get highlighted in the debates. मतलब we always talk about कि how in terms of increasing the import duty policy stance change हुआ, but साथ ही साथ कुछ ऐसे items हैं जहाँ पे import duty को reduce भी किया गया है. So again, you need to look at the broader picture. So official argument is that जो भी calibrated changes किए गए हैं duty rates में, this is going to help the domestic industry in the capacity creation, providing a level playing field, easing the raw material supply side constraints, and enhancing ease of doing business. So these are all the factors or the reasons given by the government behind this decision. And you can see that how keywords are being used and how, in small phrases, the reasons have been enlisted. So that's how you can even write in your GS answers as well. So what is this Havana syndrome? So it refers to a set of symptoms which is said to be experienced by US intelligence and the embassy officials in various countries. So it typically involves hearing certain sounds without any outside noise and nausea or vertigo and headaches. So the name suggests that it traces its roots to Cuba in late 2016. This was about a year after the US opened its embassy in the capital city of Havana, after ties between the two countries were normalized in 2015. So basically, US intelligence officials they began experiencing the sudden burst of pressure in their brains, followed by the headaches, disorientation, and insomnia. So that's what is Havana syndrome. So recently, when you're talking about this, the center has told the Karnataka High Court it will look into the matter of the Havana syndrome in India also. So there have been instances of Havana kind of syndrome happening in India as well. So we are not quite clear about what are the causes behind this Havana syndrome. So it remains ambiguous. So again, here also critical analysis of the data protection bill. This has been repeated a number of times, so we're not taking this up again. You can just go through it once, or you can refer to the previous analysis videos. Coming to the economy page. So we're seeing food inflation escalating. And finance minister says that monitoring the wholesale and the retail prices of the food items. So you can just think about what can be the government's role in bringing down the food inflation prices. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining us in today's analysis session. And I hope the topics that we took up, they are clear to you. And stay tuned for more videos every day with us. Do subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and kindly like this video. Thank you so much.